Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. Question: did everybody see the rebalanced carrier proof of concept gameplay live stream / video the other day? On the World of Warships Global channel? Yes? No? Just in case you haven't, here's some bits of it. Everybody lost their minds yet? I'm not actually going to be talking about this today. I will be talking about it in Monday's Mingles with Jingles. For a couple of reasons. First, I'd prefer to give everybody a chance to stop and think about the actual implications of what it is that Wargaming are hoping to achieve with this, fairly radical change to aircraft carrier gameplay. Because it isn't really aircraft carrier gameplay, it's aircraft carrier squadron gameplay. And also, I want to have the opportunity to actually playtest some of it myself, which may even be happening as early as today. So on Monday's Mingles with Jingles, I will be talking about this in greater depth. Hopefully that will give everybody a chance to recover from losing their minds over witnessing the initial proof of concept. Today we're going to be witnessing the return of a ship that I can't even remember the last time I featured it in a World of Warships video. The Japanese Tier 10 destroyer, the Shimakaze. There was a time, mostly during the closed beta test of World of Warships, and for a period shortly after release, when the only destroyers you could regularly expect to see on both teams in a Tier 10 battle were usually Shimakazes. Of course, this was at the time when there were only Japanese or American destroyers available to play, so it was Shimakaze or Gearing, but the Shimakaze was wildly popular compared to the Gearing, at least at first. And I think it's probably fair to say that the reason for that was because of the Shimakaze's torpedoes. And when we're talking about the Shimakaze's torpedoes, back then we're talking about the 20-kilometer range torpedoes, the infamous wall of skill that Shimakaze players would just launch in the general direction of the enemy team every 2 minutes or so, or however quickly their torpedoes reloaded, often inflicting as many casualties on their own team as they did on the enemy. Well, those days are long gone. They've been long gone for quite a while now, with the introduction of new nations and new destroyer lines and the nerfing of those 20-kilometer range torpedoes. They now have a detection range of 2.5 kilometers. Yes, you will see these 20-kilometer torpedoes. Well, not these, because Shadow Monkey here isn't using them. Nobody who's serious about playing the Shimakaze these days uses the 20-kilometer range torpedoes, because you can see them coming from 2.5 kilometers away, and they're incredibly slow, which makes it very difficult to actually hit anything with them. And even though we make memes about it, it's not usual for people at Tier 10 to continue sailing in straight lines the way they used to years ago, and the way they still do at the lower tiers. So the 20-kilometer range torpedoes are just a, novelty gimmick really on the Shimakaze, at least today. Suicidal Shimakaze captains often elect to use the Type F3 torpedoes, which have an insane speed of 76 knots, but only have a range of 8 kilometers. Most Shimakaze captains, however, elect to use the Type 93 Mod 3 torpedoes, which still have a respectable speed of 67 knots, have a 12-kilometer range, and while they're still slightly more obvious than the torpedoes of any other nation's Tier 10 destroyers, they are at least the stealthiest of the torpedoes available to the Shimakaze. So the Shimakaze was always good for two things, and still is. One, just the sheer volume of torpedoes that it is capable of unloading in the direction of the enemy team. And two, that surface detection range. With the concealment expert skill and the concealment mod, Shadow Monkey is able to get the surface detection range of this torpedo boat down to 5.6 kilometers. And that's great. It is the lowest surface detection range of any Tier 10 destroyer currently in the game. And it even got buffed fairly recently as well. That does come with its own problems, however. And we'll talk about those problems in a moment, but first we're just going to watch the results of this first torpedo salvo that Shadow Monkey has fired at these advancing enemy battleships while he's busy capping A. In fact, he has succeeded in capping A. Now, none of those ships were actually in range of these 12-kilometer torpedoes when he fired them, but they're heading in this direction. And you never know, he might get lucky. In fact, it looks like he's going to get exceptionally lucky. That Amagi's sailing right into them. Oh, and he's turning the wrong way. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. There's 1 hit, 2 hits, 3 hits, steering disabled and flooding, and the damage isn't ticking up, so he has obviously used his damage control, but here comes another salvo. 1 flood is all it's... well, 1 flood or 2 torpedo hits were all it was going to take to send that guy to the bottom. So there's the first kill and the first blood award for Shadow Monkey in the Shimakaze, and he's managed to cap A. So, getting back to the subject of the Shimakaze's insanely good stealth, that 5.6 kilometer surface detection range, and why it is obviously a good thing, but can also be a very, very bad thing and get you into trouble very quickly indeed. You may be thinking, because it seems like a logical assumption to make, that with a surface detection range of only 5.6 kilometers, the Shimakaze is the best Tier 10 destroyer around for stealing the caps. Seems obvious, and we did just see him do it. But the only reason Shadow Monkey was able to get away with stealing the cap down here at Alpha was because it wasn't contested by any of the enemy destroyers. The enemy team have a Z-52, which has hydro, and a Yu Yang, which has radar. And if either of those guys had been contesting this cap, Shadow Monkey would have had to make a very hard decision. Stay and risk being spotted, or bug out and let them have it. And the problem with being spotted in a Shimakaze is it's usually worse than getting spotted in any other destroyer, because your concealment rating is so good. For him to get spotted, that would mean an enemy ship would be within 5.6 kilometers of him. Sure, he'd spot the Yu Yang or the Z-52 first, but when a Yu Yang gets spotted and it can't see what's spotting it, it knows there's an enemy destroyer nearby, it pops its radar. And now you're in a gunfight. And the Shimakaze's guns are just not very good. Same goes for the Z-52. Their hydro has a range of 5.8 kilometers. The Shimakaze's surface detection is only 5.6. So it can outspot your detection with its hydro, which means you can't hide from them. And once again, you're in a gunfight. And the Shimakaze's guns are just not very good at all. I mean, they're better than most Japanese destroyers that aren't the Akazuki, Kitakaze or the Harugamo. But you don't want to be getting into a gunfight in a Shimakaze with anything if you can possibly help it. So yeah, the Shimakaze is pretty good at stealing caps, but only if they're not contested. Those torpedoes are looking pretty nice, aren't they? What do you think of that Izumo's chances? Oh, well, you can clearly see them. There's 1. There's 2. I think 2's all he's going to get. But that was 2 floodings as well, so he's burned his damage control, and the high explosive volleys are coming in from the rest of Shadow Monkey's team, so hopefully they can set the Izumo on fire. Are those torpedoes going to hit anything else? No, they've run out of steam. You see, the problem with the Shimakaze these days is it's just been affected by power creep more than any other Tier 10 destroyer. The Shimakaze used to be insanely popular. It really hasn't for quite a long time now, and the reason for its initial popularity was because there wasn't really a counter to the Shimakaze, other than a very well played and aggressive gearing. I mean, sure, you could always spot the Shimakaze from the air if you were a carrier, but then it would just smoke up. And sure, you might drop some torpedoes into the Shimakaze smokescreen, and maybe you'd get lucky, but maybe you wouldn't. Don't forget, this was back when there was no radar. There was no hydroacoustic search. These days, there is radar. Oh, there is so much radar. Heck, even some of the destroyers now have radar. The battleships have hydroacoustic search. I mean, there are so many different counters to the only thing that the Shimakaze has ever been good at, and that's firing a massive volume of torpedoes. There are so many counters to that in the game now that just didn't exist back when this ship was enjoying its heyday. We'll talk a bit more about the subject of power creep in a moment. For now, we're just going to watch this Conqueror get what it deserves. Don't feel sorry for him. He's a Conqueror. He knows what he did. He should be dead now, but he's humping the border, and that's doing 2 things. First, it screws up with the aim calculation, and secondly, it also slows the ship down as your engine power gets reduced if you stay on the border for too long. So he managed to avoid getting instantly slaughtered by those first 2 torpedo salvos. He has used his damage control to stop the flooding. A further 2 torpedoes hit him, but no flooding. possibly his damage control was still active. Either way, he did not in fact get what he so richly deserved. Anyway, back to the subject of power creep in World of Warships and why I think it's affected the Shimakaze more than any other ship in the game. You see, in the beginning, I and many other people made a big deal about the way that the various different types of ships interacted with each other. Very much a sort of rock, paper, scissors kind of mechanic going on. At the time, battleships countered cruisers, cruisers countered destroyers, destroyers countered aircraft carriers, and aircraft carriers countered battleships. It was very simple, and that's more or less the way the game worked at first. Of course, that was never going to last. And it only worked like that because there were so few ships actually in the game. Don't forget the game shipped and it only had American and Japanese ships. And it didn't have American battleships and it didn't have Japanese aircraft carriers. As soon as they started expanding on the various different types of ships available, as soon as they started adding new nations, that wasn't going to last because they had to do something else to start to differentiate between the various different nations in the game. The Japanese nevertheless retained their flavour, as far as the destroyers were concerned, as torpedo boats, at least until the introduction of the Akazuki and more recently the Kitakaze and the Harugumo. The Americans kept their flavour as the gunboats. But that was kind of bad news for the Shimakaze, because while the Gearing is an exceptionally good gunboat, its torpedoes aren't that bad either. Then they introduced the German destroyers, which have very, very good gun handling characteristics and some relatively hard-hitting armor-piercing shells. They have very fast reloading torpedoes in comparison to just about everybody else, and also, of course, come with hydroacoustic search. Then we have the Pan-Asian destroyers, which are also very, very good gunboats. They also come with deep-water torpedoes, which offer very, very little warning of attack, in direct contrast to the Shimakaze's torpedoes, which can be seen from the moon. Not that it seems to be... Oh, that's a dead Ismo. Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, I didn't say you couldn't hit anything with the Shimakaze's torpedoes, but, you know... 225,000 damage done. Yeah, I know, not bad. Anyway, yeah, power creep. So you've got all of these new destroyers in the game, which are all very good gunboats, and all have pretty decent torpedoes into the bargain. They come with hydroacoustic search, they come with radar in some cases. Some of them even have the defensive fire anti-aircraft consumable, so you can't even reliably keep them spotted with carrier fighters, for example. And makes it increasingly dangerous and unlikely to score an accurate hit on them with dive bombers or torpedo planes. Shimakaze doesn't get any of that. It was becoming increasingly obvious that the Japanese destroyer line was in need of some love. And so Wargaming's response, acknowledging that the Japanese needed some form of gunboat as well, introduced the Akazuki and then the Kitakaze and the Harugumo. So how did any of this help the Shimakaze captains, who are still sailing the same one-trick ponies in almost every respect that they were sailing back in the closed beta, with only two changes? One, their torpedoes now get spotted from even further away, so a nerf, and then recently, a buff to their concealment. Other than that, this is still pretty much exactly the same ship that everybody was playing back in the closed beta. I really do think this ship has just been power creeped into oblivion, which you may find hard to swallow, looking at the fact that Shadow Monkey has done 225,000 damage in this game, but this is the exception rather than the rule for Shimakaze, as I'm sure most Shimakaze captains would agree. And yet, you see, I'd made it down as far as the Kagero in the Japanese destroyer line, and I have stayed there for a very, very long time. I have never unlocked the Yugumo at tier 9, and I had absolutely no intention of unlocking the Shimakaze here at tier 10, until very, very recently, when I have now finally unlocked the Yugumo, and I am going to be getting the Shimakaze as my next tier 10 destroyer. Why is that, Jingles? The arms race mode that's coming up in the next patch. I did a video on it last week in my patch preview on the public test server. You see, while I stand by my claim that the Shimakaze isn't that good at stealing caps unless those caps are uncontested, because it is quick and it is sneaky. In the arms race mode, there are multiple caps available to be grabbed, and you don't have to sit in them for a minute in order to grab them. You can capture them very, very quickly. So a ship that is fast and sneaky, and they don't come much faster, and they definitely don't come sneakier than the Shimakaze at tier 9 and 10, is absolutely ideal for grabbing those early capture points and grabbing the buffs for the team. And a Shimakaze with 6 levels of the reload buff that you can get in the arms race game mode can fire off all 15 of these torpedoes once every, I think, 1 minute and 15 seconds. So I think the Shimakaze is going to be a very, very popular choice in this new tier 9 and 10 only arms race game mode that's coming into World of Warships in the next patch. And I think this is actually a very good thing for tier 8s as well. Because if arms race becomes popular, and I don't really see any reason why it shouldn't, with all of those tier 9s and 10s in the arms race queue and not in the random battle queue, that means all the tier 8s are going to find themselves top tier. Probably more often than not. And that can only be good for the tier 8s as well. Particularly the tier 8 cruisers, who really suffer when they get into tier 10 battles because they don't have the heal that tier 9 and 10 cruisers have. Unless, of course, you know, they're British. Or, you know, they're the Atago. So I'm really looking forward to the next patch, and I'm hoping to have my Shimakaze ready to go for it. He hasn't done a huge amount of damage in the last couple of minutes, has he? That Izamo definitely saw the torpedo. Oh, hang on a second. Edinburgh. His engine isn't running. He's still in the spawn. That guy's AFK. Huh. Well, AFK or not, you can still be spotted by an AFK ship. So Shadow Monkey is obviously keeping his distance from the Edinburgh while giving him a quick torpedo salvo and using the island to attempt to get closer to that Izamo, who, if he has any sense whatsoever, has turned around and is heading north. He should spot him and be spotted by him. There it is. And there he is. And he's elected, which isn't, given the circumstances, unreasonable, to make himself the biggest possible target by sailing broadside, but he wants to get all of his secondaries firing as well as all of his main battery guns in an attempt to... Oh, well, there's a torpedo hit and a flood on the Edinburgh. But yes, you can see what the Izumo's doing. He's trying to kill Shadow Monkey rather than just run away from him, because let's face it, you're not going to run away from a Shimakaze in an Izumo. I don't think he's going to be able to pull it off, though. 294,000 damage, and the Edinburgh, who is still out there somewhere, is still flooding, and is now, in fact, the last ship left alive on his team. Can Shadow Monkey pull off a ridiculous 300,000 damage game in the Shimakaze? I think he probably can. The Edinburgh is still flooding. Oh, there he is. Doesn't have a huge amount of health left. There's the 300,000. Fires the guns for almost the first time and definitely the last time in the game. And he actually gets a gun kill on the Edinburgh into the bargain. Sadly, I don't have the post-battle results screens, but, well, 302,000 damage in a Shimakaze. What more do you need? So, yeah, Shadow Monkey, well done. Thank you for sending that one in. Everybody else, I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.